Hi viewers, welcome to my channel. Gowthami FS 2012. ఈ సిరీస్లో ఈరోజు వర్బ్ ఆఫ్ ది డే పర్సుయేడ్. దీనికి తెలుగులో అర్థం నచ్చజెప్పడం. దీనిని సెంటెన్సెస్లలో ఎలా వాడాలో చూద్దాం. ముందుగా యాక్టివ్ వాయిస్. ప్రెసెంట్ సింపుల్ టెన్స్. I persuade, we persuade, you persuade, he persuades, they persuade. Active voice present continuous tense. I am persuading, we are persuading, you are persuading, he is persuading, they are persuading. Active voice present perfect tense. I have persuaded, we have persuaded, you have persuaded, he has persuaded, they have persuaded. Active voice present perfect continuous tense. I have been persuading, we have been persuading, you have been persuading, he has been persuading, they have been persuading. ఇప్పుడు active voice. Past simple tense. I persuaded, we persuaded, you persuaded, he persuaded, they persuaded. Active voice past continuous tense. I was persuading, we were persuading, you were persuading, he was persuading, they were persuading. Active voice past perfect tense. I had persuaded, we had persuaded, you had persuaded, he had persuaded, they had persuaded. Active voice. Past perfect continuous tense. I had been persuading, we had been persuading, you had been persuading, he had been persuading, they had been persuading. ఇప్పుడు active voice. Future simple tense. I will persuade, we will persuade, you will persuade, he will persuade, they will persuade. Active voice. Future continuous tense. I will be persuading, we will be persuading, you will be persuading, he will be persuading, they will be persuading. Active voice. Future perfect tense. I will have persuaded, we will have persuaded, you will have persuaded, he will have persuaded, they will have persuaded. Active voice. Future perfect continuous tense. I will have been persuading, we will have been persuading, you will have been persuading, he will have been persuading, they will have been persuading. ఇప్పుడు passive voice sentences చూద్దాం. ముందుగా passive voice. Present simple tense. I am persuaded, we are persuaded, you are persuaded, he is persuaded, they are persuaded. Passive voice. Present continuous tense. I am being persuaded, we are being persuaded, you are being persuaded, he is being persuaded, they are being persuaded. Passive voice. Present perfect tense. I have been persuaded, we have been persuaded, you have been persuaded, he have been persuaded, they have been persuaded. Passive voice. Present perfect continuous tense. I have been being persuaded, we have been being persuaded, you have been being persuaded, he have been being persuaded, they have been being persuaded. ఇప్పుడు passive voice. Past simple tense. I was persuaded, we were persuaded, you were persuaded, he was persuaded, they were persuaded. Passive voice. Past continuous tense. I was being persuaded, we were being persuaded, you were being persuaded, he was being persuaded, they were being persuaded. Passive voice. Past perfect tense. I had been persuaded, we had been persuaded, you had been persuaded, he had been persuaded, they had been persuaded. Passive voice. Past perfect continuous tense. I had been being persuaded, we had been being persuaded, you had been being persuaded, he had been being persuaded, they had been being persuaded. ఇప్పుడు passive voice. Future simple tense. I will be persuaded, we will be persuaded, you will be persuaded, he will be persuaded, they will be persuaded. Passive voice. Future continuous tense. I will be being persuaded, we will be being persuaded, you will be being persuaded, he will be being persuaded, they will be being persuaded. Passive voice. Future perfect tense. I will have been persuaded, we will have been persuaded, you will have been persuaded, he will have been persuaded, they will have been persuaded. Passive voice. Future perfect continuous tense. I will have been being persuaded, we will have been being persuaded, you will have been being persuaded, he will have been being persuaded, they will have been being persuaded. రకరకాల verbs ను ఎలా వాడాలో తెలుసుకునేందుకు మరియు ఇటువంటి వీడియోల కోసం వెంటనే ఈ ఛానల్ను సబ్స్క్రైబ్ చేసుకోండి.